I've been doing some a small mini-series from using things out of Oswald Chambers. The first Sunday I did the discipline of spiritual tenacity. Remember me talking about that last week. I talked about the determination to serve. Before I give you what mine is today, I want to give you a little background of me. I had the privilege for 8 years to teach vocational agriculture at Pendleton County. And a lot of you will remember one of my products of that, John Roseberry. Just throwing that in to the side there. Before he died, he was coming here. But along with vocational agriculture, there's a national and an international organization called, used to be the Future Farmers of America, but I understand they've changed that to FFA. Now I'm saying all that to bring into you that at every monthly meeting we had an actual, is anybody in here was an FFA at all? At least one knows what I'm talking about, if you went to any of the meetings. Yeah, did you have classes? There was a ritual along with that, and each person would get up. If they were an officer, they would tell their story, and they would do everything there, and they would do it every time, and we as teachers would do our very best to make sure that they were perfect in their part. We even had contests on parliamentary procedure, and chapter meeting team is what they called it, and they would get up and they'd say their parts and they would do it all. And after each one of them, and when the vice president would turn around and look at the president and say, or why is the president so stationed, and then he gives his little speech on there and that is finished, they all sit down. Then the president turns around and he beats on the gavel for them to drop to their seats, and then he beats on the gavel 3 times again. Future farmers, why are we here? To practice brotherhood, honor rule, opportunities, and responsibilities, and develop those qualities of leadership which a future farmer, now they say FFA member, should possess. Why in the world am I mentioning that this morning? The question I have for you is, why are you here? They had a goal. They still have that goal. And they are way over 75 years strong now and going, and it's still very strong. There have been several different mottos that have been made by other pastors here. I've never sat down with the board and we come up with a specific, what you would call, and people would say, this is your purpose statement, this is what you do. I'm going to give you our purpose statement this morning. That purpose statement is to develop sanctified Christians to be sacrifices for Jesus Christ. Amen. Nothing else will get it done. Nothing else will take care of it. You say, well, preaching will. Preaching will if it's sacrificed on the altar of God. You say, well, singing will get it done. Singing will get it done if it's sacrificed on the altar of God. Then you say, well, what we did on the outreach, and that's exactly what we want to do in doing that, that can be done if it is all sacrificed on the altar of God. And then what I want to talk about today is winning souls for the Lord. We can only win souls for the Lord by sacrificing it on the altar of God. Oswald Chambers, in his February 24th, said, and he had in his caption, the delight of sacrifice. The delight of sacrifice. What does that mean? Are you doing things for promotion of the church? If it is, it's wrong. You all know that? If you're doing it just for the promotion of the church, it's wrong. Well, I'm doing it to let other people see that I'm a Christian and I want praise for that. You're doing it for the wrong reason. Now you say all of that. Church attendance, I think, is very important. I don't want you to stop. Okay? Church support and being, and I use this word proud in a very generic way to say that I love my church and the church family. That's great, but that's not what it's all about. What it's about is that we make sure we have sacrificed ourselves on God's altar and are new creatures in Christ Jesus. And all of this that we are doing is not for just to show, but to show the world how much we love Jesus and how we want things to look better and not everything be the same old all the time. When the Spirit of God has shed abroad the love of God in our hearts, we begin deliberately to identify ourselves with Jesus Christ's interest in other people. Yes. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 15, Paul was writing to the Corinthians, and if you read chapter 12, you find that Paul has a vision here of what that he would like to see happen, but he's finding out that the Corinthians are not exactly doing what they need to be doing, and they are complaining, they're doing all of these things, and they're saying that, Paul, you've taken money away from us and given to somebody else, or you've done this and you've done all of that. They were big complainers. Okay? Paul was saying, forget all that, and I'm telling you right now, I'm telling you how to do it, and this is how to do it. In verse 15 he says, and I will very gladly spend and be spent for you. Though the more abundantly I love you, and the less I be loved. What does that mean? What that means is he's telling them, I can't help what you're doing. The only thing I can do is do my very best for God. And when we are dealing with people that are seeking the Lord, and that is our goal, and as I said, that what we need to do is to learn how and ask God to help us to be sacrifices that other people will see Jesus Christ in our lives to the point that they want the same thing. And if they see a crotchety old grumpy person, they're going to say, I don't want that. I'm glad you all wasn't here earlier this morning. Brother Warren saw it, but he loves me, and Beverly saw it, and she loves me, and Kirk saw just a little bit of it, but most of it was gone by the time, I'm not good with change. Okay, I love that thing back there being the same all the time, and all I have to do is push two buttons, and it's all good. You know what the world wants to see from the people that park their cars out there, walk that little thing, and walk up the steps into the new porch that we have, and walk through here, and as they come through, you want to know what they need to see? They don't need to see people walking into a church, turn around, walking out, and leaving, and getting in their cars and going. They need to see His people living their lives for Jesus. If it means the ball goal, if it means fixing hot dogs, if it means something else or whatever, or Bill. Bill does more witnessing than you all can ever imagine, and he's right. Bless his heart. He's be about like me getting out there and trying to push when I have my boots on. But he gets out there and he does it. It takes him a long time, and if anybody says anything, I'm going to tell you, Bill Shoemate has the job of mowing our grass as long as Bill Shoemate wants to do it. Okay? And there's a lot of people that will, as he says, feel sorry for him while he's doing it. And if you ever watch him, and I hope you don't mind, Bill just sits there and he goes like this and mowing the yard. But you know what Bill's doing? Bill's doing what he feels like God has done, and other people comes around and asking questions about it, and while they're asking questions about it, Bill don't just say and start complaining, well, I wish somebody else would do it, but because that nobody else is to do it, I have to do it. No, you don't hear that from Bill. He turns around and says, this is my little thing that I can still do for the church to where that I got saved and was changed. I wasn't going there, Bill, but I hope it's okay that you brought it up, and I'm going to finish it. You all see what I'm talking about? Amen. They need to see us as sacrifices for Jesus Christ. They need to see us doing things that they say, wow, I want that too. They need to see us doing things that they say, I am hungry for that because I don't have that, but I do want it. Amen. And that's exactly what Paul was doing here, as those other people were being the complainers, saying, well, there's nobody else that will mow the yard, so I'm going to have to mow the yard, or there's nobody else doing this, I'm going to have to do this or do that. No, they were complaining about it, but Paul was the example. And his example said, I will gladly do that stuff. I will gladly spend. I don't talk much about money, and I don't do that because I think the Lord deals with you with that. But I'm going to tell you, when He wants you to spend, He will deal with you. And if your heart is right, you have no problem with this. Amen. Y'all weren't expecting that, were you? Yeah. It's not about the money. It's about the heart. Yes. It's not about what you give. It is about what you are willing to give. And because the widow mites is the perfect example, that woman gave everything. And you say, well, I can't do a thing with 2 pence. There's nothing I can do with that. God can do miracles with what you have. So He wasn't just talking about money, even though the money is put in there. He said, I will gladly spend my time, my money, my efforts, my prayers for the cause of Christ. Amen. And the cause of Christ is to win people to Christ. Yes. So I will gladly spend and be spent. I don't know why it is, but a statistic has said that a sermon that is preached for 20 to 30 minutes is equal to 8 hours of hard labor. Wow. For years, we preachers worked 16 hours a day. I am tired most of the time. Beverly can tell you I'm tired when I have preached a sermon. But I'll gladly do it for 20, 30, or 40 years to see one soul. Amen. You say, man, that's not very good production. That's not mine to make. Mine is to be faithful and do it, to spend and be spent for this community of which we are responsible. I spent several years wanting to get out of this community. Now, let's go build a church out here somewhere else. I really did. It was my goal. A lot of this hasn't been done sooner because my goal was to sell this and go somewhere else. God said no on that. I'm telling you, He said no on that. I want you right here. So we're going to do the very best that we can right where we are. And if it is just to see one child get right with God, it will be worth it.
Amen.
Sure. We want more. We want to have a whole lot more, but we're not guaranteed that. Only thing that we are guaranteed is God's faithfulness to us if we are faithful to Him. And He will give us that. And He goes on and says, though the more abundantly I love you, I'm going to change this just a little bit. The more you take me for granted. Now you don't see that up there, do you? But then read it. The less I be loved. In other words, they're saying, you do it, and we're happy for you to do it, but don't expect us to do it. And giving support to a preacher is not about a job description, and I'm going to stop here just a little bit. Young man calls me, and I've had you to pray for him a time or two. He calls me up quite often, especially when things have sort of blown up in the church, and we talk about it a little bit. He said he had some of the people that in the church, because they were paying him full time and he didn't have another church, he had a woman to call him up and say, will you come and bury my dead cat? Okay? Y'all with me here? And a lot of people will take it and say, well, he's the preacher. We will have him to be the one in the community to do it all and do all those things. Now, I'm not saying this to complain. I'm just saying shame on the people for saying that is something. He did it. He did it. He stopped everything that he was doing and he went and he buried this woman's cat for her. The purpose of that was to show her, I'm not doing this for you or because I have a job. I'm doing it because I love Jesus and you asked me to, and I'm not going to turn you down. Amen. Now I got off the subject there just a little bit to say, my job is to love you all. My job is to love other people out there in the community. And we find that a lot of times that when people will say, well, this is his responsibility or that is responsibility. Mine is to preach and feed you and to make you the kind of people to go out there and to witness and to win souls for the Lord. Now that doesn't negate my responsibility. It adds to my responsibility, because my responsibility that if I have taught you to do that and I have helped you to do that, then I have a responsibility to lead by my example and to see what I am doing, that you do it as well. And in doing that, we do it all for the glory of God, and none of us deserves any credit for it. Amen. Paul was not looking for credit. He wasn't looking for all of that. All they were doing was saying, you just go do it and we'll sit back and let you do it. I'm here to tell you, folks, I am not capable of doing it by myself. I need your help just as much. Okay? Shepherds do not produce sheep. They feed sheep. Sheep produce sheep.
Yes.
And I want to give you two things this morning about soul winning. And before I give those to you, I want to tell you the only way you can truly win souls to the Lord Jesus if you have been won yourself.
Yes. Yes.
If you're not right with Jesus this morning, I am going to invite you to make things right with Him, and it makes things totally, totally different. It's different at home. It's different at work. It's different at all those things. Okay? In trying to understand this morning is I'm not trying to put pressure on you. I'm not trying to say you've got to go do this number many times. You've got to do all this. I'm just trying to develop an atmosphere of what needs to happen in the life of this church. Okay? And that is, in soul winning, we need to be trained by Christ in a new calling. Matthew 4:19 tells us, did I not give you that, Savannah? Okay, I didn't remember for sure. And he saith unto them, in Matthew 4:19, he's looking at the disciples. He's got the ones, Peter and James and Andrew, and all of them are around, and he's at the fishing boat. He looks at them and says, come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. I can't do it, but Jesus can. What was different than in the Jewish thing? The Jewish thing is all they did was sacrifices. They brought their sacrifices to Aaron and to the Levites and all of the people down through the time that they were the priest, and that was what their job was. Everybody would bring their sacrifices, if you will, and that took care of things for the year, and they were all good, and everything was great, and that was finish of it. Jesus came and said, no longer am I interested in the sacrifices that you can bring. I am interested in the sacrifice of you.
Amen. Amen.
What does that mean? As my dad used to preach and say that the Indian came to get saved, and when he did, he come first and he brought to the altar and said, Lord, here is my tomahawk. Boy, that dates it, doesn't it? Then the Indian would come back, and that wasn't good enough, and said, Lord, here is my bow and arrow. That wasn't good enough. What were those two things to the Indian? Survival techniques. Correct? Okay? But those were instruments. They wasn't what God was looking for. Then the next thing, he comes to the altar and he says, Lord, here's the old Indian. It's not about what we give. It's who we give. And the only thing we have. Yeah, God can use a sinner's money. Don't get me wrong. He can use a sinner's money with no problem. But the only thing that we have to give God is our lives as a sacrifice to God. And that is our reasonable service.
Yes. Yes.
Our sacrifice. And to be a soul winner, what he was telling these people was, I want you to leave your means. Now, a lot of times God doesn't ask you to leave your job. What he does ask you to do is to be different in your job. Okay? But to these people, they left. Dad. I don't know how well Dad liked the fact that his sons were taking off and going somewhere and leaving him there to mend all those nets and do everything, but he was happy for his boys to be going doing God's work in God's kingdom. What he is asking us to do is to give ourselves a sacrifice to God to win other people to Jesus Christ. There's a radio station that one of our attendees that plays the piano for us works for. It's called WMTC. There was a reason that that radio station, that they got those names, and that was, the name of it was Winning Men to Christ. Self-sacrificing. They left all to be able to go and do what was needed. Did they know what they were getting into? No. Did they really know to the extent of what Jesus was asking them to do when he said to come follow me? No. Did that take away any part of their willingness to do it? No. But Jesus did it step by step at the time they needed to see it happen. And may I say, in a new walk with Jesus Christ, He will be with you every step of the way.
Yes.
One growth after another, after another. And it could be sort of like Jacob saw the ladder leading up into heaven, and all of the, in order to get there, what you have to do is to make one step on the run at a time. And keep doing it. And He will help you with that. So, to be trained by Christ means that you are being trained by the very, very best.
True.
And what a privilege of that happening. Not only is that done, but the second thing is that the sacrifice of personal rights and privileges. 1 Corinthians 9:19 tells us, "For though I be freed from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more." And I'm not for sure I told Beverly or Savannah to do the next one. "And unto the Jews I became a Jew, that I may gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law." What he's saying is, and Paul was this. Paul was half Jew, but he also was a Roman citizen. So he was able to work both sides, if you will. He was able to work both in there, and in doing that, he was able to say, I want to let you know that I am no better than you. The only difference between you and me is I've been saved by the blood of Jesus.
Amen.
And that changes me.
Amen.
To understand sacrifice, giving up something. We think we give up a lot when we give up the world. Do you know what you give up when you surrender your heart to Jesus Christ? You know what the only thing you give up? Eternity in hell. To me, that's a no-brainer. Yet the devil will hold on to you, and he'll start grabbing you, and he'll start saying, no, that's not it. There are so many things that you need to grab a hold of. And with this coronavirus, may I say that all the people seem to think the only thing that matters is survival in this world. Well, I've got news for them, and I've got news for you. You are not going to get out of this world alive unless Jesus comes back and raptures us and takes us, and then we will be changed.
Amen.
Amen.
So what are you holding on to then? False hope. A sacrifice here. Paul said, I'm going to be whatever I need to be for anybody and that doesn't mean that he's a chameleon and he's going to be a sinner along with everybody else. That is not what that means. That means I am going to prove to you that I am not better than you. I am just like you, except I've been saved by the blood of Jesus.
Yeah. Amen.
That's what he's talking about, sacrifice. Technically, we sacrifice nothing to follow Jesus. We don't. We sacrifice absolutely nothing, because everything that God asks us to give up, we need to give it up. I could have some people give you some wonderful testimonies here this morning, but I'll let them do it on their own sometime. But let me tell you something. What the devil has a hold of any of us is not worth, nothing is worth spending eternity in hell.
True.
And the devil will turn around and he will say, you're going to give up so much if you give your heart to Jesus. Or then he'll look at you Christians and say, if you start witnessing to other people and you start telling them, you're going to lose your friends. I don't know about you, but that sure has come over in my mind several times. You can't really talk to them about the Lord because they'll quit coming around you. They'll start coming around you when they need you. Every time they'll start coming around you when they need you. You know why? Because they trust the one that you trust in. Or want to trust in that. Sacrificial living for Jesus Christ is no sacrifice at all.
Amen.
Is no sacrifice at all. All is benefits.
Yes.
All is benefits. And if you look at sacrifice the way that God looks at sacrifice, is you're giving up nothing to gain everything.
Yeah.
We as Christians say, I can't go do this because I need to do this something else. If God is asking you to do it, you sure don't need to be doing the other thing that you think you ought to be doing.
Amen.
He's never failed us. He knows a whole lot more than we do. And may I say again, any sacrifice that we think that we have is no sacrifice at all. And I will say that once you give your heart to Jesus, then it's not a sacrifice any longer. It is a pleasure.
Amen.
Is it easy? No, because Paul said, when I do this and I've done this for you, you just about turn right around and slap me in the face. Not everybody that you witness to is going to follow Jesus. But that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to present Jesus to them.
Amen.
Then it becomes between them and Jesus.
Yes.
Amen.
Praise be to God that we have this opportunity that we can do. Paul became a sacramental personality. Wherever he went, Jesus Christ helped him with his life. Many of us, after our own ends, and Jesus Christ cannot help himself to our lives because we're interested in what we want. If we are abandoned to Jesus, we have no ends of our own to serve. Paul said he knew how to be a doormat without resenting it. Because the mainspring of life was devotion to Jesus. We are apt to be devoted not to Jesus Christ, but to things which emancipate our spirituality and stricken us or stymie us in some way. Paul's motive was this: I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren. Wild, extravagant is it. When a man is in love, it is not an exaggeration to talk in the way that Paul was talking about the love he had for Jesus Christ. That was his whole purpose. a person that was a part of the Sanhedrin in the Jewish religion, left it all to follow Jesus. My question to you this morning, are you willing to give up self and follow Jesus today? Kirk, will you come to the piano? I don't have a clock, so I may have gone over or I may not preach as long, but I preached my heart. Let's stand. Are you ready to follow Jesus this morning?